Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this special COD board meeting on May 14, 2026 at 6 p.m. in the Estill County Board of Education boardroom, located at 253 Main Street in Irving, Kentucky. At this time, I would like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everyone and remind you that there's a sign-in at the entrance to the door, if you'd like to sign in. And do you want to say the pledge? It's not on there.
Yeah, we can.
You don't stand up.
Don't.
You're fine, Sheila, you're fine.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. So tonight we had on our agenda for a work session related to our budget. Mr. Brock, would you like to start us out with this?
Do you want to do a motion in a second to go into work session, then we'll discuss it?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion at this time that we go into our work session. Do I have a motion? Tammy Harding makes a motion, Sheila Samples makes a second. So at this time, we'll be in our work session related to the agenda.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, I'll let Mr. Yost go through it. He's prepared a sheet for you all to kind of break it down step by step. I will tell you, we have way undershot the amount of money that we think we will get next year. So this is gonna be like worst case scenario. When we did it, he and I talked and we knew that the projection was low. I said, keep it there, because I would rather work within a very low budget and still be okay, and then we know we're gonna get more funding, and then it'll be even better. So he's given you what our seat projection is, and he'll go through that with you, talking about transportation and seat base and all that, so. Yeah, he'll go line by line through it. So, Mr. Yost, do you wanna kind of go through and talk about this, and then he's giving you another sheet, which will be revenue and everything for next year, and he'll talk about that line by line as well.
All right, good evening, everybody. A couple of things before we get started. I know we say the phrase living, breathing document a lot, but remember, this is our tentative budget. The final working budget is due in September. We've still got a whole summer of hires to go and things that will change this in.
I don't know if he's recording if we're live.
Are you recording? Are we online?
We are live. Okay, so we are live.
All right.
All right. So as we go through the summer, new hires happen, retirements potentially happen. Some of these numbers will change, especially in general fund, which is the bulk of what I'm going to talk about tonight. It's a very fluid situation, especially as we go through the summer. The things that we do know at this point, and I want to start off with that. The seat calculation, the forecast seat just came out on Friday. So when I say I was sweating getting the budget ready for you all this week, I could make a pretty close projection, but the state put out projections on Friday. And I wanted to walk through seat with you all just a little bit, because I think it's important for you all and the public to understand where a good chunk of our money comes from in our general fund. So the first thing is the legislature changed the seat base this year up $40 to $4,626. It's our guaranteed base per pupil. So basically, when you take that number and you multiply it by your ADA, you end up with the total there for the guaranteed base, which is $8,470,669.
And ADA is our average daily attendance. So if we have 2,053 kids, they don't pay us for 2,053 kids. They pay us for what our average daily attendance is, so.
And that's why when you hear people talk about attendance being so important, that's the reason why. It's the amount of money we get from the state is based on our attendance, not on our enrollment.
Yeah, and we have to staff by enrollment, because you
Yes.
can't staff by number of kids that's gonna be there daily. You have to staff by enrollment.
So in this projection, when Mr. Brock and I met, we put, this is the worst case scenario. This is if, this 1831 number is without we get to drop our 5 lowest days. We get weather inclement days. We get to add in our virtual and performance-based students. None of that is taken into account here. Because if things fell out the bottom, this is where we would be. So
virtual students do not count.
they do count, But at the end of the year, we don't know how many of them will complete their requirements.
Okay,
Yeah,
So they get added at the end of the year.
okay.
yeah. They're not, they count, they're just not on this
Yes.
Yes.
projection.
So this projection is truly our worst-case scenario. Do I expect this to be the number? No. If it goes up 50, let's say it ends up at 1881, you're talking about an additional $250,000. So it's important to understand when we budget, this is my philosophy and Mr. Brock's philosophy. I'm glad our philosophies line on this. We want to be conservative in our budgeting, and if we end up with extra, wonderful. But we don't want to bank on having the extra, because if we do and we come up short, then we're in trouble.
Yeah.
So I'd rather budget conservatively and end up with more than I thought we would than the other situation. So what you see here is that number. Thank you, Jeremy. At risk, that's our free students, our free lunch students. That's why even though we are a district that all students get free lunch, it is still critically important for us to get that paperwork done at the beginning of the year to identify our students who are eligible for free lunch, because those students who are considered at risk, we get an additional amount per pupil for that. So when people say, why do we have to fill out these forms where everybody gets free lunch in Estill County? That's because those forms dictate what our at-risk number is going to be for SEEK. Home and hospital, those are the students who are, for whatever reason, too sick to come to school, and so we have to have staff that can go out and work with those students. Exceptional child, that is our students with special needs. And over on the left, if you look in that left box, it's based on our December 1 child count from the previous year, and there's low, moderate, and high incidence. So high is like our students who maybe are just getting speech services. Moderate are your traditional students who are identified with IEPs. And then students who are severe or low are your students who might be more like an MSD classroom. But we get a weighted multiplier for those students as well, because they require additional services, so we get additional funding to provide those services. And then our transportation, I sat through an entire session on transportation at CASBO, the conference we went to last week, and we still don't understand how transportation gets calculated. No, yeah.
It's very complicated.
We understand it up to a point, but there is an efficiency play, there's an efficiency rating that you get that basically you don't know where you're going to fall until everybody in the state is ranked. And so it's a sliding scale. And so they use a factor depending on where in the state you rank in terms of how efficient your bus routes and everything are. So like we looked in, for example, Estill County is above average in terms of its efficiency in terms of buses and how we travel. There were some, so basically what the efficiency means is if your amount costs, let's say $9 per mile per student, we're actually able to do it for $8.60. Some counties, the guy who did our presentation was from another county, Eastern Kentucky. Their cost is about $9.34 per student, what it should be, but their actual cost is about $11.50. So they are very inefficient in terms of what their numbers look like. But all that comes together with the number of students. So when everybody wonders, why in the world do you ask us twice a year for our T codes for our students? That's because the T codes are what dictate what the transportation is going to be. So if a student travels to and from school on the bus, or if they travel only one way on the bus, are they more than 1 mile, or are they less than 1 mile? The T codes are what affect that transportation number on SEEK.
I remember those.
Then, the next piece of it, so that gets you, all that together gets you your calculated base funding. Then, the next number you see after the calculated base funding is the less 30-cent local effort. So what they do is they take your assessment, what your property assessment is going to be. And this is an estimate at this point. We won't know the official estimate until the PBA's got it turned in July 1. But this is a ballpark estimate. Last year, it was pretty daggone close in terms of what it ended up being. But basically, you take that estimate and divide it by 100, because property taxes are done per $100, and you take 30 cents out of that, and that's where that $2,335,107 comes in. So they subtract that out from your base funding, saying that that's the local effort based on property taxes. So then you end up with the adjusted state portion, and then you end up with a thing that I will let Mr. Brock explain a lot better than I can, because it is his baby, and that's the state tier 1.
So tier 1 was the piece of SEEK that came in the early 90s. It came out of the lawsuit, and it was originally part of CARA. It is the factor for where your county ranks as far as property tax, like your local tax base versus, counties that are very rich tax base. So we get an add-on, a tier one add-on for that comparison of how our local property versus say Fayette and stuff like that. And that's the tier one add-on. There's 7 districts, I think, in the state of Kentucky that do not get a tier one add-on because the property, local property assessment is so high that they don't get that, that tier one piece. Now, that tier one piece, like I said, it came out of the lawsuit back in 1989 and 90 because, the legislature got sued because they wasn't funding education to a high enough level. Well, when they really looked at it, the property rich districts had all kinds of money for kids, and property poor districts didn't have as much money for kids. And there was like a $3,600 imbalance between what property rich districts had per kid and what property poor districts had per kid. So tier one was created as an add-on for your seat to try to shrink that gap, basically. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's the gist of it.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Okay, for transportation, does that include, trips also into that quote, or is this just getting them to and from school?
To and
No, to and from school.
Basic
Okay.
transportation.
Okay,
Yeah, anytime, if you have any questions as we're going along, please ask. That's
Yeah.
the whole point of
This
the work
is-
session, is for y'all to ask questions.
This is old news.
What's that?
I said, this is old news to me.
Yeah, but it's funny because if you're in the school system, you know this fairly well, but if you're outside the school
You have no
system,
clue.
nobody has a clue. And I told Mr. Brock, I said, I felt like it's important for us to kind of
It
walk
is,
through
yeah.
it so that you
Sure.
all, as a board and the public,
No,
know exactly what we're talking about when we say seek funding, because
yeah.
we say seek funding all the time, but what does it actually mean and how is it calculated? So I
Yeah.
think it's good for everybody to know.
Yeah.
So you add the adjusted state portion, you add the adjusted tier one, and that gives you your total state seek. But then before you actually can calculate your final number, you have to take out what's called capital outlay. And that's money that we have to take. It's allotted at $100 per ADA, so 1831.1 times 100. So that number will change, of course, if our ADA changes. But basically, that's money that you can use on capital projects. This year, as a board, you all approved moving that over to help cover property insurance. So it can be used for a multitude of different items. It can be used for maintenance, it can be used for building, it can be used for paying for certain types of insurance, it can be used even to pay off buses if you go that route. But that has to be subtracted out and put into a different fund than the general fund every year.
Yeah, and it's strictly tied to properties.
Correct.
Yeah.
From that, there's then the bottom left box. So our total seek as of now would be projected at $11,649,312. That sounds like a huge sum of money, but when you factor in that before on behalf payments, that's basically all but about $5 million of your revenue. That seek funding is critical for a school district like ours, in Eastern Kentucky, especially in rural Kentucky. In the bottom left, you have what are called the nickels. Of course, we have the FSPK nickel, which we all have to do in Kentucky to be able to access building funds from the state. And then, of course, the recallable nickel, which was passed back before the ATC was constructed. Really long story short there is you have to look at your assessment, and then they take that, and your 2 nickels come out of that. So 1 nickel of your property tax. So where those nickels come from in terms of the local effort is we have to take those out of the property taxes we get every year. So before we even touch the property tax for spending for the school district, we have to move this money over. So this year it was $745,746. It gets moved over into Fund 320, which is a different fund as well. And then the state equalizes those. And what that money is primarily used for is for your bond payments every year.
Yep.
So for next year, we're projected to get about 2.48 million from our local effort plus the equalization, and our bond payment total will be about 2.4, which means that after all is said and done, we should hopefully have about $80,000 that we can also do a capital funds request on, which we can then move to offset maintenance costs and property costs in the general fund as well. So again, things that aren't calculated yet because I can't guarantee that's going to end up being the number. It depends what the property assessments and all that are.
Okay.
Are there any questions about SEEK? Okay.
And different funds are used for different allowables.
Yes.
So depending on what fund you move that money into, it may be designated to go for
Yep.
one certain thing.
Absolutely. If anything that is in the Nichols Fund, Capital Outlay Fund, or our, it's called Fund 400, but our debt service fund, those are restricted funds that can only be used for very specific purposes. We can't use those for salaries, we can't use those for, general costs, those are for things that are related to capital projects.
And a lot of people don't understand that concept.
No,
Yes, so there is a significant amount of money that we do get as a school district that can't be used for anything other than paying for capital projects or paying for bonds for projects that have already been completed or started.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very good point, This is very
Yes.
good to know that.
And
And
we're
I
talking,
would say if some people are still confused on what the seek means, that is very attainable online, and it will explain exactly what the seek is,
and it'll
without
also
us
tell you
going
to
into it more.
explain about the nickel too.
Yes.
Right.
yeah, and we're talking about only Fund 1 tonight.
For all intents and purposes, because with Fund 2, we know a couple of pieces of Fund 2, but we've not learned what our state grant awards will be for next year, and we've only learned about half of our federal grant awards. So Fund 2, I will give you all an update this summer when I know those numbers, but for all intents and purposes, other than Title I, Title II, and Title IV, everything else in Fund 2 is just a carryover from what last year's numbers were. Because we don't have the updated numbers yet, and we won't get those until generally after school goes out. Like the Perkins budget, or the GMAP for, all your federal projects isn't even open yet. So you'll know those this summer as soon as I know them, but,
I had another question about transportation.
Yes.
You were talking about the cost of doing business to transport children by bus. And some counties have more expenses than we have. Is that related to the condition of the buses or the terrain they travel? Or what exactly determines that?
a lot of it is just how spread out your county is.
Okay.
That's a huge piece of it,
How
because.
far they transport kids?
Yep, because it factors in everything from, and you've got your cost to operate your bus, you got your bus drivers, bus aides, diesel fuel, maintenance, all of that goes into
The cost of
the
doing
cost of,
business? Yeah.
the cost of doing business to transport kids to and from school. So,
The older your fleet is, though, usually the
Yes.
higher that number is.
Okay.
Yeah.
that's why it's important to kind of keep your buses on a rotation to make sure that your fleet's not getting too low.
We have a nice looking fleet. I look at Madison counties and I look at Clark counties, and I said, with my mom, and I said, ours are all uniform, internationals.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, they've got blue bow. I went through all the 4 different types. I said, our fleet's nicest looking.
And Mr. Brock, along with our transportation bus garage leaders, they do have a fleet plan. So they know which buses are there, what services are due, when they rotate out. So we do have a fleet plan
Yeah,
that we follow.
we're actually gonna meet next week, to get more efficient on that too, because there's some things we can do to even get more efficient, that I've identified, and we, not just me, but kind of different people talking and kind of brainstorming. We've got some things that we can do to make it more efficient, and we're looking at a service, to come in and help us with that, and they think they can also help us save quite a bit of money, so.
Good.
And especially, I think, Mr. Brock talking about is, we unfortunately, it's hard to get new bus drivers sometimes. And if we have bus drivers retire, then it'll allow us to be more efficient in our routes, so that if we do have a bus driver retire and we can't find someone to replace them, we can absorb that without,
Yeah.
Cutting bus routes. So there are a lot of perks to it.
Good.
Okay, you have this lovely giant document, which you are more than welcome to look through, and if you want me to go line by line through it, I'll be happy to. But this is the entire budget, so this has all of your funds. It has Fund 1. Now, when I say tentative budget, of course, Fund 2 in here is mostly just carryovers from this last year.
Yeah, because we don't have those numbers yet.
We don't have those numbers yet, so as soon as we have the numbers, that's why, again, you have a tentative budget in May and then a working budget in September. So your working budget is when everything has to be down to the penny. You've also got all the funds here, so you've got Fund 310, which is your capital outlay, pay 320, which is your nickels, 400, which is your debt service, and then 51, which is food service. For all intents and purposes, everything except for Fund 1 has to be balanced at the end of the year. There are a few exceptions with 310 and 320 where you can take that money and escrow it for 2 years. But for all intents and purposes, tonight we're talking about general fund. And when people see like fund balance and things like that online, that's what they're talking about, is that Fund 1 or general fund. So if you hear me kind of go back and forth, if I say Fund 1, if I say general fund, I mean the same thing with those two. So we're gonna live in general fund for the most part tonight. But I do have, if you are flipping through and you look at Fund 400, for example, I have all of the bond payments and specifically what we're gonna have to pay in principal and interest and all that on each of our bonds for next year.
Yeah.
That's already in there, it's all completed. What I am projecting as of right now, and again, we're talking, in my opinion, our worst case scenario right now. We're gonna end this year with about 163,000 to the good. That can change. There are, of course, a couple of big wild cards out there right now, in terms of some property acquisitions in the county, and what that could mean in terms of some back property taxes and things like that. If that happens, this financial picture looks even rosier without even having to lift a finger. So there are still some pieces to this puzzle that are kind of wild cards, if you will. But again, Mr. Brock said starting off, this is what bottom would look like for next year. It can look a lot better than this depending on a couple of factors. If our ADA is a lot higher, that's $250,000, $300,000, there you go. Property valuations go up more than expected, that's gonna increase our property tax base. There's a lot of factors in here that could make this better.
Yeah, and again, like I said to start, this is worst case scenario.
Yes,
And that's what we wanna look at, because then we know if these other things happen, we're even better off.
So how does this beginning balance compare to like prior years? Are we better, or are we
we are much better than we were at this time last year.
good?
And this beginning balance that you're referring to, that's just what we would have available on a day-to-day basis if we needed something. That doesn't include our contingency and things that are put aside. Is that what you're saying?
This is what is left over in general fund at the end of
This
this
is
year.
what's left
Yeah,
over?
But
Okay.
that doesn't take into account like the capital outlay and all those
Yes.
funds. So those are a whole nother set, and there's millions of dollars in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So, Seek's on there, it's the same number as from the other sheet. Local taxes, now, when I say local taxes at 3.223 million, that includes your property tax, delinquent property tax, motor vehicle tax, and franchise tax. All that comes together to equal that number, but before you get there, you've already subtracted out that big $783,000 number from the nickels you have to transfer over. So that number's already taken out of that. So that's where we're looking at in terms of your local tax base. Then there's the utilities tax, which generally in a given year is around 750. Put 725 here just to be a little conservative on it.
And what does utility tax consist of?
That's gonna consist of the tax that's like on electrical bills, water bills, cell phone, internet, things like that.
Okay.
Omitted property tax, that's, things that may not have been caught by the PDA and here in Estill County. The state then takes that and sends out checks, so I get that quarterly from the state to put into the bank account. Interest on investments, that's purely interest on our general fund. Now, we also get interest on our other funds as well, but you have to put the interest from those into those other funds. Miscellaneous revenue, that's literally just, we get all kinds of little random things. There's a couple of places in town that sell licensed Estill shirts, and we get a royalty check once a month. Like, that's what miscellaneous revenue is. We get lots of random little things like that. Medicaid reimbursement, I wanna give Brooklyn and Amanda Bryant, our district nursing coordinator and district special ed director, I wanna give them a lot of credit because we have worked really hard together this year to increase our Medicaid reimbursements. Their whole nursing team, the teachers that work on that, but that's huge because the ultimate goal of your Medicaid reimbursement is you wanna be able to pay for your entire district nursing staff. and we're getting very close. So I'm very pleased with that number. We will probably be over 200, actually not probably, we will be over 200,000 this year, because currently the state or feds, I'm not sure which one to call out on that one, they're about 3/4 behind in terms of our SBAC reimbursements. So with, those are usually, they roll about $15,000 each, so we're sitting on about $45,000 that we haven't received yet.
Well, you're looking at $200,000, just to give some perspective. The first year I was here, it was about $60,000.
Yeah.
So they've done a really good job.
And this year it's gone up just over $50,000.
And when the nurses were all hired, we put them into the COVID pot of money.
Yeah.
And so we've been able to sustain that
Mhm.
because of being able to bill for Medicaid services. Otherwise, we could have been back to one district nurse or maybe two nurses that float.
I know
But
when
thankfully, we have a nurse in every school, and some of that started when we started to get some of the COVID money.
Yep.
And again, I think one of the things that I know I put a huge emphasis on this year out of the finance office is if we can find a place to scrape up $1 that we had not been able to get before, we're finding where it's coming from. And that's what I think part of this budget reflects is, you know, we've not had to do a lot of draconian cuts and things like that because we're finding every revenue stream we possibly can. And there's a lot of people who've gone into working on that. So
And
it's a lot of
being
credit.
more efficient with what
Yes.
we have with our spending as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
School resource officer and Cliff, basically we get money from the state for each of our school resource officers. We get $20,000. Cliff, please don't ask me off the top of my head what that acronym is for, but it's Kentucky Law Enforcement something or other. But basically, we get money from the state to help offset the cost of that. It's about $24,000 to $25,000 per SRO. So it doesn't foot the entire bill, but it helps us out quite a bit. The capital outlay funds transfer, I put that in just because I'll be requesting again this year, along with Mr. Brock, to transfer that money out of 310 back over to help offset property insurance costs. The 3-year-old tuition class at South Irvin, that's been something this year that they're up to 5 kids in that, and hopefully they get more next year. But as we continue that, that's an additional revenue stream that provides really low-cost education and childcare for 3-year-olds at South Irvin. And I think I hope people in the community realize that it's a really, really, really good program. Your children get their meals, they get snacks, they get education, and they get to really start preschool a year early. And it's extremely low cost. It's $25 a day, and if you can find a daycare that's doing $25 a day, please show me where it is.
But one thing to note in that is they do have to meet the criteria to be
Yes.
enrolled. So it's not for everyone, right?
Well, we think we're gonna have enough room next year that we can open it up and have paid positions. We
Okay.
had enough this year that we did open it up and have some people that
Okay, because
paid.
people are gonna ask questions about that.
But for the 3-year-olds, this is a paid one, so they can do that.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's not the free spots that you have to qualify for.
okay,
Yeah,
all right.
yeah, we have enough staff that we have extra spots.
Expenditure reimbursements, there's a lot that goes into that. Like, for example, this is just 2 examples, we have lots of examples, but like, we have an MOU with the state for for one of our teachers that works at the ATC. We get reimbursed for their salary. We have a staff member who's on loan to the state through an MOA, and we get reimbursed for their salary every year. So what's that?
Nothing, I
Oh,
just
sorry.
said, I know what it is.
With things like that, we get expenditure reimbursements, and there's a lot of different things that come into play there. But generally, that's somewhere in the order of about $500,000. And then last but not least, indirect costs. Some of the things from Fund 2 and food service, we can take indirect costs to offset administrative costs for those programs. So that usually will total somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000,
Yeah,
so.
we can do it with title as well.
Yep, so federal programs and food services, the big ones where you can take that from. That's the revenue streams. Mr. Brock jumped the gun on me just a little bit. One of the things that I love is with the expenditures here is we've gotten a lot more efficient. We have really worked hard to quit spending like we were still getting COVID money. And say, what can we provide our students? We want to provide them all the opportunities we can, but how do we do that efficiently? And I'm really happy to say that the opportunities that Mr. Brock had already begun when he came into the district, we've not changed one of those this year. We've just figured out how to become more efficient in what we're doing. And that speaks volumes to a lot of people across this district. You know, when I've had budget meetings with directors and we've talked about how can you get more efficient in what you're doing. Transportation department, for example, when I first said we're gonna be looking at budgets this year, the first thing was, well, we've gotta keep the buses running. Have you looked around to see, is there a place where you all can get the same quality parts for less? So they identified a whole new vendor this year who they could get parts from, and they were able to get the parts they needed from that vendor to a large extent, and it cut their costs on those parts by about 15%.
Ooh, that's great.
So just being more efficient with how we're doing things, that's been huge this year. So we do pay the sheriff's office commission, that's 3.75%, so they collect the taxes for us and we give them 3.75%. The 062X utilities, that is your electrical and natural gas. Your 04 utilities, those are your water and sanitation, water, sewer, and sanitation. Or sorry, 041 is water and sewer, 042 is sanitation. So you see the budget numbers there. If you look at it on the budget sheet, you have it broken down by department, by school, but this just gives you kind of the broad picture. Total salaries and benefits from Fund 1. This is as of this moment. Now, as we hire in teachers, we've had teachers retire this year. If some of those teachers come in and they're new teachers, that obviously is going to change the budget number there. So as it comes in, I want you to understand this number will change, but I do not anticipate this number being any higher. Because we left a lot of numbers in there for teachers who retired, knowing that, well, okay, we're putting the number in, but if you get a first-year teacher versus a 30-year veteran, you're going to save, after fringe, $30,000 to $35,000 in general fund. So this number shouldn't get any higher. This number should go down some, especially as we go through summer hires.
Does this include sick days?
Sick days in terms of payouts? Yes. That's a 0291 and 0298, and those are factored in. So I'm speaking in code, I'm sorry.
It's okay,
Salaries and
I understand some of the
benefits,
codes.
everything in Munis is that's 0100 or 0200 series, those are your salaries and benefits. So this number represents all of the salaries and benefits for general fund.
Okay.
Now, people who are paid for out of grants, people who are paid for in food service, things like that, those are in Fund 2 and 51, so they're not counted in this total. So I don't want people to be misled and say this is the total cost of our salary and benefits for the district. This is just general fund. So our food service and our grant funded in Fund 2 are in addition to this. So when you look at it, I mean, we really have about $16 million worth of salary and benefits for our district when you count Fund 2 and Fund 51. So it's, again, the vast majority of the money we take in this district in a given year is going to pay for quality employees to teach our students, to drive our buses, to cook our food, to make sure our buildings look nice, to make sure Jeremy can keep doing technology, you know, all that good stuff. Well over 60% of our total money that comes in, I would actually say it's probably closer to 70, but I'm shooting off the cuff a little bit on this one. But the vast majority of what we take in as a school district is going to make sure that our students have quality people working with them every day. So that's, I think, an important thing for everybody to know as well when it comes to the budget. School Section 6 allocations, that's $180,200 this year. District paid athletics. Athletics is almost exclusively self-sustaining now, but one of the things we still do is we help with the uniform replacement each year and a helmet reconditioning for football, because those are two really big expenses each year. So as a board, you all continue to commit to doing that for athletics programs. Superintendent budget, that is a lot of different things, and I want to make sure people understand that's not going to Mr. Brock's pocket. That is going to provide services for kids in our schools. That's to going when we have conferences. That's a number of things. All that money is put right back into the school system.
Yeah, any kind of conference travel, hotel rooms, when the board goes to KSBA, all that comes out of that. I'm glad that you kind of said that, because if you just look at that and you say, oh, superintendent's budget, $60,000, boy, that's a lot of money that he just has to spend. No, I never spend that. That's district-wide for the
Yes.
travel and the stuff like that, so
And also, it kind of becomes something where, let's say there's an unanticipated expense that we need at the district level.
Yeah.
That's where that money comes out of.
yeah.
So
We've
it's
done
money
some
that's for the school district.
Gifted stuff out of it. We've done, I mean, a lot of it goes back to kids and stuff too.
Yeah.
It's just, that's the way it's designated as a line item.
Yep. Technology, I'm gonna give Jeremy a ton of credit on this one. He has really learned how to tighten his belt for me.
Well, to be fair, Josh and I met and we went line item by line item by line item by line item on stuff that is district-wide, stuff that is, individual purchases. Somebody needs a mouse, somebody needs a monitor, somebody needs a keyboard. And so, he's saying he gets a lot of credit for that too, because he and I have spent several hours going over it and trim, because in the past, sometimes it was, Jeremy, go order this, we'll deal with it on the back end. And it never really got dealt with properly. So, and that's why he and I working together really streamlined.
This is a place where this year alone, we saved over $200,000. Just on this one item, or one line item with technology. So about $80,000 of Jeremy's budget comes from the state through a program called KETS that you all approve twice a year. You have to approve those KETS offers of assistance. And what it is that state gives us a certain amount of money and we match it out of general fund. And then basically that's about $80,000, then Jeremy gets an additional 120. But I wanna make sure everybody understands that. That is not like for Jeremy's Play Toys. That is so we can keep our antivirus software. That's so that we keep our network up and running. That's so that we have all of our Google licenses for our Chromebooks. That is any number of things that goes into that. But that is so our technology in the district can stay up to date and keep running. So that's really important. The next few budgets I want to kind of talk just a little bit about, and I'm going to skip around just a little bit on this sheet for you all. Maintenance budget, custodial budget, and transportation budget. Those budgets are for in-house items. So again, I sat down with Mr. Reese, I sat down with Ms. Freeman, and we went and said, what can we do to make sure we keep the lights on, to keep the buildings looking nice, and to make sure the buses keep running? What can we do to make sure we stay within our means on that? And we sat down, and to their credit, they have done a phenomenal job on that this year. We have a maintenance budget, that's for district-wide maintenance. We have a custodial budget, that's $80,000, and then a transportation budget, that's also $100,000. If you skip down, there's a line called outside services. And that line item encompasses both transportation and maintenance, as well as some technology if we have to. What that line item is for if we can't fix it in district. If we have to have a company come in and do some repairs. So if Amtech has to come in and repair a fire alarm system at South Urban, that's covered under that outside services. To me, when I came in and I started analyzing the budget, it was really confusing to me because I said, it's hard for me to understand exactly where money's going to. So we separated it out and we said, we're gonna have a budget line for we can handle this in-house. And we're gonna have a budget line for we have to call somebody in to help fix it. And differentiating it like that has helped be able to monitor more efficiently how we're spending our money in terms of maintenance and transportation especially. So that was a really big deal. Finance budget, that basically encompasses two huge things. That encompasses the ability to have Munis every year, which is the required accounting software by the state. Also rolled up in that is some Infinite Campus costs, and then the new Red Rover program, which we will be rolling out in August, Mr. Brock. I know you're saying you'll believe when you see it, but Jeremy had a meeting this week, and we're getting pretty daggone close, right, Jeremy?
Very, very close. Like testing stage.
Testing stage. We're
What's
getting
it called?
Red Rover. It's going to make our subsystem, our accruals, our timesheet stuff, all that much more efficient, and it'll all go online now. So
We've been doing all that with paper in the past, so we're gonna get timesheets, accruals, clocking in, clocking out, HR, like onboarding for HR. It's all one big cohesive system.
I knew we had been working that direction for a couple years, but I didn't realize what it was called.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we actually kind of switched midstream because the previous program, this started before I was in this position, but the previous program we were trying wasn't working as well as everybody hoped, and so
It was
Red
actually
Rovers.
pitched that it could do certain things, and then after we got into it, it couldn't. Tyler, just again, this is maybe too much information. Munis in and of itself, which was required by the state for all financial software, does not play well with others. And
At
so
all.
we've actually, with Red Rover and Munis, to connect them, we actually had to go to a third party to help create the syncs.
Build an interface.
Yes, yes, which is, it's not just an office, this is like a guy, this is what he does.
Yeah.
And it's what other districts have done, so that we can have that data flow back and forth, so that we don't have transcription errors of, well, somebody gets this, and then they have to type it in over here, and then they go over here and they type it in here, it just does it automatically. So, and it should speed up some things that have been delayed, because somebody has to go through and imagine you clock in every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then they gotta go on a piece of paper, it's all gonna be automated now. But it's very, very complicated to set all this up because of our job codes and everything else.
We understand.
The next few lines are just some individual department budgets. I want to speak about one in particular, though. That's a curriculum and instruction budget. You all see that and go, are we really only spending $2,000 on curriculum and instruction? The answer is no. We use a lot of our federal grant money to help with things like iReady at the elementary schools, iExcel at the high school level, Paxton Patterson Labs at the middle school. A lot of that comes out of our grant-funded monies. So we are pouring literally hundreds of thousands of dollars from into curriculum instruction out of our grant funded.
Yep.
So we have a very small general fund budget because there are a few things that are unallowable out of federal grant funds. So we do give a small budget just to make sure that we can cover some small little things that aren't allowable.
Yeah, and we do it that way too, because those federal funds are very restricted on what you can spend them on.
Guidelines, yes.
And that's one thing you can spend them on and actually do it, be good for the district, you
Yes.
know?
The SBLEA, that's the school-based law enforcement, that's our SROs. In addition to the Safe Schools money, we have a small budget for them for things they need. Insurances, we have a lot of insurances. I learned when I came into this position that I did not know we had. But that grand total is about $550,000 for next year. It'll be just under that, but I'm waiting on one more quote for cyber insurance. Another area we've gotten a lot better at this year, and I think a lot of it is just simply coding. We are making sure that if substitutes are for teachers that are in a grant-funded area, we have that budget in the grant-funded area. 2 years ago, the total cost of the district and general fund for subs was about $450,000.
Yep.
Next year, that will be down to $325,000. I still would love for it to get lower, but the fact that in 2 years, we've cut that $125,000, that's $125,000 more dollars we can use to educate our students. And we've also had a reduction in subs this year, which has been great, but a lot of that is simply making sure we're coding it to the correct areas in terms of grants and things like that.
What does that mean for the health budget?
That is like supplies for our stuff at the schools for nurses. So like when Brooklyn needs to resupply first aid kits and resupply medications and resupply AED equipment, things like that. That's that budget for her to be able to make sure the schools have not just the staff, but the equipment they need for their services.
Does that include like, your AEDs and those things?
So our AEDs actually, that's another fun too thing. Our AEDs, we actually got another grant this year, big head nod to Brooklyn. AEDs all in cost about $2,000 a pop.
I know they do, that's why I was
She
asking about
applied
that.
for a grant and we're getting 6 new AEDs
Oh, great.
this year, so that's $12,000. And the nice thing about that is we pay the $12,000 and then turn around June 1 and we get reimbursed by the state immediately.
Yep.
So I submit the documentation and we get reimbursed for it. So we have to buy it and then submit the paperwork and get reimbursed.
Super.
But that's not a general fund expense, that's a Fund 2 thing. So, and that's how some Fund 2 things work, is you pay for it and then get reimbursed. So,
And what about that attendance budget, what does that mean?
for that is a lot of, it's honestly, it's a catch-all for a lot of things. Mr. Norton has that at his disposal, he can use it for attendance incentives for kids. But also, if we have to, like this year, had to get a substitute to help out with some home health type stuff, we can use that to help cover it. So it reaches into a lot of different things, but that's really Mr. Norton's budget. It's a DPP to be able to provide attendance services for kids. I should have taken Red Rover out there because I moved that into the finance budget because to me, it made more sense there than as a standalone. And then miscellaneous, I want to explain what that is. That is everything that doesn't fit nicely into another budget. So, as a board, every year you give $5,000 to the marching band to help pay for, I believe, color guard uniforms and flags, I believe is what they use it for. But you give them a small budget for that. You give a $5,000 budget to help with graduation every year at the high school. So things like that. In the past, it's also helped with like costs for flow party in terms of transportation, things along those lines.
Yeah.
It's a catch-all for all the things you as a board do that don't really fit nicely into another budget line. So in this budget, you would see that it's spread throughout lots of different budget lines. But for the purposes of you all, that's really services that you all as a board provide for students that don't fit neatly anywhere else. So that's about $70,000 a year. That being said, your total expenditures are $16,445,974.55 out of general fund, which leaves you an extra $370,000 this year, which when you add it to the $163 beginning balance, the contingency at the end of next year should be about $550,000. A little over $500,000. And considering where we came when I started in this position last year, that is,
Amazing.
an amazing job by a whole lot of people working together to say we want to provide opportunities for our students and we want to do it in the most efficient, responsible, fiscally responsible, being good stewards of taxpayers' money. And I'm really proud of everybody and the effort they put together to really rein in some of the excesses and say we're going to spend money focused purely on helping students learn and have good opportunities.
Well, I give you credit too. You've had those meetings with directors, you've kept them within their budget. They cannot overspend their budgets now without coming to me. And I can go to you at any time and say, where are we at? And you can tell me. So that's important as well. You've done a great job with that, Mr. Gaines.
Thank you.
I have a couple more questions.
Go for it.
So, I know I keep coming back to COVID money. Is all of that shored up now and we're completely through that process? So
Yes.
there's no more?
No more. We are not able, the COVID money's done.
Okay.
There's no more ESSER
I
funding.
have people ask me that
Yeah.
lots of times,
Yeah,
so.
it's
no
been
more
done
answer.
for a while.
And all of our employees that were hired with that have been moved into different positions, or we've been able to sustain that and that's all taken care of?
Yeah, we've sustained services even though the money's not there. And that's part of why it's important for us to get efficient like we have, so.
And like I said at the start, and I want to reiterate this, this represents the worst case scenario. And I think we can feel pretty good about how far we've come in 1 year, really. How far we've come in 1 year if this is our worst case scenario.
Yeah. And even if you don't say worst case scenario, if you say this is a very
This
conservative.
is the most conservative budget.
It's a very conservative
Very,
budget.
very, very
Yeah.
conservative
So.
budget.
Yep, and so when you look at it, I could be coming back to you in September and saying, that beginning balance, I said $160,000, maybe it's a little more.
And then I have one more question. Is the sheriff office commission tax collection 3.75% that we pay for them to collect taxes?
Mhm.
Is that comparable to other surrounding
Yes.
counties,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
what is that?
It is very comparable. Mr. Brock had asked me to reach out earlier in the year, and almost every district I spoke to, it was somewhere between 3 and 4.5. There are some who pay as high as 4.5, but 3.75 was about the middle of the road for what people pay for property tax collection. And there are a couple districts who are exceptionally brave and do it themselves, and I have no idea how, they're small independent districts, so they can probably pull it off a little bit easier, but, 3.75 is pretty much middle of the road for what
What about in comparison with Powell County, Lee County, and,
comparable.
okay.
I think, with that, I don't have it in front of me, I believe one was slightly higher, one was slightly lower.
Okay.
But no, it's very comparable with the median for what school districts charge.
I know, Madison and Clark, that's it.
Well, they were actually right about the same.
Yeah, they
Are
are.
saying?
It's fairly standard, in terms of that.
Okay.
But like I said, it fluctuates between 3 and 4.5.
Okay.
I don't think I found one lower than, in the area, I mean, I didn't go out to like Western Kentucky or anything, but in the area, I think 3 was the lowest I found and 4.5 was the highest. it's funny, there was actually, literally the day after Mr. Brock asked me to look into it, somebody started a thread on our Munis users group asking that very question. And people just started
So
replying
you
with,
had a resource.
here's what it is. So I was like, well, I can find a lot without even having to call people, but
Right there at finger touch.
But the better job that our sheriff's department does, and they've done a great job this year, the better job they do in terms of collecting property taxes, they make more money, but we also get more money to give students opportunities.
My sister-in-law would help us do that thing.
That is about it for my presentation for you all, for the budget side. Are there any other questions you all have?
I just have, speaking of property taxes, and I know on this sheet, the, last fiscal year was like 1.7.
Yeah.
And then the current year is 2.5, but the projection is 2.1.
So the
What- what's-
the 2.5 is with the anticipation, and am I allowed to talk about that yet?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a property acquisition by a company called Blue Gyro that's going to be happening. And with that, there's gonna be some back property taxes paid. And so basically that was gonna amount to about $500,000. So my initial projection had been at 2 million for this year, but that would have bumped it to 2.5. Well, once they pay those back property taxes, you don't get that lump sum again.
Yeah, that's what, so the next year then.
The
it'll
next
go
year,
back to-
It'll go back, but also if our property valuations go up, that'll mean about an extra $100,000 in terms of property taxes. So that's the thing this year, and you all as a board have been able to lower or keep property taxes the same over the last few years. And as the property valuations go up, we're able to still get some additional revenue as a district, even though you all are taxing at the same rate, which is a great thing for our community.
Well, Ms. Rios, you've made things very easy to understand. I appreciate your time and your, just how hard you've worked on this budget, and it's very evident. So I commend you and your team and everybody that's worked on this, so thank you.
And this is something we wanna start and do every year, like have a
Yes.
working session and have it recorded and people can call. And if anybody watches and they wanna know where money went for whatever,
Yeah.
come on in,
Yep.
we'll show you the invoices, we'll show you what was paid out, we'll show you what was left.
And this working budget, even though we said it's fluid, it's
Yeah.
changing, it's a living, breathing document, it's available for
Mhm.
people to pick
Absolutely.
up if you want a
Yes.
copy of it.
Yep.
It's available, we're very transparent. We want the community to understand where their tax dollar and the money is going. So
Absolutely.
Yes.
it's available, you would need to go through, just call
yeah.
Mr. Brock
Yeah.
or come to central office and, we can get that for you.
And actually, even after, with the new bill that was just passed, it'll be available on the website.
Yeah.
Starting in July.
So
Yeah, starting
also-
July 1, we'll have it on the website
On the
and it'll be
website.
updated. Anybody can go to our website and look at it.
And these are also audited.
Yes.
You know, I wanna make sure that everybody realizes that it's just not something that we keep internally,
Yep.
that it is audited by outside.
Oh, yeah,
School
yeah,
districts are required to have an annual
Yes.
audit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
yeah. We have, actually ours is wrapping up right now, I think. You and I talked about that this week as well, so.
And then
we'll
the
be-
auditor's report will be
Yeah.
available for the public
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
see also.
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, we actually, through, last year, I discovered some things, and I've talked to Donna and talked to you all about it before. With an audit, like, it's really good with Fund 1, but we really have to keep an eye on Fund 2.
Yes.
Because there's some things that can happen there that can be deceiving, and we caught that, right, last year, and that's one of the reasons why the beginning balance was low and the carry forward's low. We'll build that back up over the next few years. And basically what had happened was there was money coded in Fund 2 as that we were going to get the money, and every year they just coded more there and more there and more there, and we were never gonna get the money. So it looked like we were gonna get money that we were never gonna get. And so to correct that, we took a big hit in Fund 1, the general fund. We had to do a
673,000.
we had to do a $672,000 correction, and then we had to do another $300 and some thousand correction because of another coding error. So, what we're looking at here, there's nothing, we found that, we fixed it, this is exactly where we're at.
And with my experience with auditors too, it also, besides making sure that everything is correct, it's a learning experience. And a lot of times their level of expertise will point you in a different direction.
Yeah,
So,
the thing about it is, and why I say it's deceiving, so like Fund One has to run in the black, like you cannot have any negative, it's got to be right. Fund Two, you could have a negative, but it's showing as a receivable, and they don't pay a whole lot of attention to that, cause they assume you're gonna get that money.
Reimbursed for it.
And there comes a point where, like, one of the corrections was technology, and it had been just every year, just added on, added on, added on, and it looked like we were gonna get a big bunch of money for technology. Well, you heard the cats every year, it's about 80 grand, and it was in excess of $600,000. We were never gonna get that money. So in order to fix it, instead of just kinda shoving it down the road, when I found it, I'm like, we have to do this. It's gonna make our money look bad for last year, which it did, but you can see we've already recovered and we're headed in a good direction, so.
The other thing that I think is important to note is you have a lot of money that comes in from federal grants and other
Yeah.
sources. And if you're not asking for reimbursement
Yes.
for those, and you're not watching to make sure that money comes in so that you can account for that, you can end up in a deficit there as well, or not having the money that you're due.
Right, and that's where, in reality, if you look at Fund Two at any point during the year, you're usually in the red, because you're always a month behind in terms of your reimbursements. So like, we just ran our first, tomorrow our first paychecks for May will go out, and then we'll have another paycheck go out May 31st, or May 30th. The day after our second paycheck runs out for the month, I get the federal health reimbursement from Amber Lee. We get that put in, and then I submit a federal cash request to the state, and so we get our fund back in balance within 3 days after the second paycheck of the month.
Yep.
So
Which
that's
is,
what
which
we're
is
doing.
also a lot quicker and a lot more efficient than it has been in the past.
Because you make sure you're getting the money in within a week of the last paycheck of the month, because, and you can do federal reimbursements more frequently, but it makes sense to do it once a month, because that's when your federal health reimbursement goes out, is that once a month. And then as soon as that goes out, we go ahead and do the federal cash request, because then you've accounted for every federal dollar during the month.
And so Sharon and I have a lot of experience just with Medicaid reimbursement. So you're constantly waiting on reimbursement for services that are provided by by your staff for Medicaid reimbursement. And that can be 45 days, it could be 120 days.
I mean, we're literally sitting right now 3/4 behind in terms of those payments. So I mean, I wanna say it's the April through June of last year, we're still waiting on that payment.
Yeah.
So, when those come in, I mean, that's one of those receivables Mr. Brock talked about. So I know there's $45,000 that's sitting there that we're gonna be getting in, it's just a matter of when.
Yeah, I think the difference in that is though, we will get that.
Yes, we will get that money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of those you know you're gonna get, because I can already tell you, I can pull up the report and show you exactly how much we're going to get, it's just a matter of it has to be released.
Yeah. And in the past, we had some items that were listed as looking like we were gonna get the money, but we was never going to get the money. There was no money coming in.
Does anybody have any questions or anything else to discuss? Or Mr. Brock, do you have anything else?
Not on, well, yeah, we're still in the working session. We do have, we put our, and I can talk about it, you can talk about it, it doesn't matter. We did put our financial service out to bid. Board says
Oh,
we're
yeah.
supposed to do that every 2 years,
The
our
new
policy. And so we did get bids from, and we won't decide this tonight, but I will give you all the information. We did get a bid from Citizens, and we got a bid from PB&T. Citizens bid is a floating rate based on the Federal Reserve. It is whatever the Federal Reserve is minus 2.25, I think is what they had in there. So currently, what it would be for us is a 1.5% interest rate if we go with Citizens. PB&T gave us a 4.05 fixed rate for 2 years. So their bid is at 4.05 interest on our money. Citizens is at 1.5 on our money.
And
So-
Citizens was floated and theirs was fixed for 2
Theirs
years.
is fixed for 2 years. We will get it regardless.
According to.
Yeah. And it's actually more than that because it's 4.05, but then we get an additional 0.05 for direct deposits. So we get 4.1 on some stuff. Well, anything that's direct
Just as
deposit.
if, let's say we had $4 million in the bank, at 1.5%, we would get $60,000. At 4.1, we would get $164,000 interest.
So that's something we'll talk about and vote on at our regular called board
Yeah,
meeting,
yeah,
but
I
that's
just-
something that we
It was
wanted
a
to put
working
out there,
session.
so.
I just wanted I wanted you all to have the information since we were talking about finances. And that's, that's the 2 bids we got, and you all will decide as a board on which direction you want to go.
Okay.
So,
Do we have anything further?
I don't think I have anything else. so.
Anything further? Okay, if not, thank you for this working session. It's been very insightful. We
Good job.
appreciate your hard work.
Yes.
And like I said, once again, if anybody has questions or if they want to see the budget, it'll be online July 1, or you can stop by central office to obtain your personal copy. We're happy to share that.
Mhm.
And we appreciate everyone for joining, and I'd like to call for a motion and a second to close this meeting. I have a motion from Sheila Samples, a second by Tammy Hardy, and at this time, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, this